Welcome back. All right, news of the day video for all you fine people for your Thursday, March the 28th, almost April 1st. Almost. All right, so starting things off with Bo and Byram getting fined for last night's interference on Crookshank. It would appear that some people on the internet did not know that there is a young player in the NHL named Angus Crookshank, which I will admit it does sound like that it should be somebody who's related to groundskeeper Willie. I will admit with the name. But I mean, I knew people named Crookshank growing up. Angus is a good old Scottish name, so I mean, hey, it's a good kid. Has a bright future in Ottawa, and Byram's fined for interfering with him last night, which has fans not happy with the fine, thinking that there shouldn't have been anything. So there you go. At any rate, that's what happened from last night's games. Nothing else from Department of Player Safety because there was only the two games. There really wasn't anything egregious there. Philadelphia news. Philadelphia's on the board twice. It's interesting what's going on with the Flyers right now. Starting off with Sealer may return this weekend, according to Danny Briere. He's close. And it sounds like Drysdale, while Drysdale's not as close, we may see him return to action next week. The expectation is he'll be back before playoffs. That could be huge for the Flyers, who have been struggling here and there defensively, and definitely the goaltenders could use the extra protection of Nick Sealer blocking everything. So having Sealer back this weekend could be huge for the Flyers. Their schedule from here is not as daunting as some of the schedules for the teams they're fighting for that last playoff spot with. And so we'll see how things go for the Flyers in the coming weeks. Also, Alexi Kostitsyn is likely to report to the Phantoms once they've dealt with immigration issues. So Kostitsyn's coming over. The question becomes something else, and it comes to this one as well. So the Philadelphia Flyers have used up their emergency recalls. They have no more room for emergency recalls. That's why it was said earlier this week they're stuck with Ersson and Sandstrom. They don't have room to bring anybody else up. So the question then becomes whether or not Kostitsyn coming over is also subject to that. Danny Briere saying he's going to talk to the NHLPA and the NHL and see whether or not there's a way that they could bring him up potentially. But there's a possibility he's going to play with the Phantoms the rest of the way. But it does sound like they'd like to get him in the lineup if they could. And, again, Flyers related, so we'll jump down to this. Goaltender Ivan Fedorov. Fedorov was the one who was signing with the Flyers and then had to do military service instead. So he did the year of military service. Then he was going to come over and sign with the Flyers. Nope. He signed in the KHL for a year. And even though the double IHF said, hey, that's not the way this is supposed to work, he's played the whole year in the KHL. However, his contract has been terminated in the KHL as of today, so that may open things up for him to begin the process of joining the Philadelphia Flyers organization as well. There's been no signing. You would think that Danny Briere, if he can get Kostitsyn, if he can get Fedorov, and if he can get some sort of an allowance to bring them up, you just never know. At the time that Fedorov was basically, pulled away from any hopes of coming over to play for Philadelphia, it looked like the Flyers were keeping room on their roster for him. So it would have been likely Carter Hart and Fedorov. And so maybe Fedorov at this point is capable of stepping in. He had a .914 save percentage in the KHL this season, so that number's decent. He's 27 years of age. So we'll see. We'll see if he ends up signing a contract with the Flyers and what the Flyers are able or allowed to do once he and Kostitsyn have both come over. But it's an interesting time for the Flyers right now. At the very least, if they can get Fedorov signed to a contract for this year, and if they potentially could for next year as well, that could help them out a lot. This is a team in Philadelphia that it feels like is a starting goaltender away from potentially being a contending team. And there are a couple other pieces I think they'd like to add to really and truly get into that conversation. But again, the Flyers have been far more competitive this year than anyone expected them to be. I think they're playing with house money. And if these two players both come over and if they play, who knows what Philly might be able to do. Baranov is out. He's week to week for the San Jose Sharks. It's a lower body injury for him. Mike Hoffman's set to return tonight for the Sharks. He's been out with a concussion, so that's good news for the Sharks. Mixed with bad news, I guess, in that Barabanov recently, I think, had been playing the best hockey he had all season. But for San Jose, they do have a lot of injuries and have had injuries throughout the season. We don't talk as much about them because, of course, San Jose is so far below the playoff line, people don't pay as much attention to who is or isn't in their lineup. Austin Matthews is seen as a game time decision tonight against the Capitals. You just put he's doubled the T there. But he's got an illness, so he's sick. He may or may not play. I think it's a matter of if you're worried about the illness being passed to his teammates, stay home. Stay home. But if you're not, then, yeah, put him in the lineup against the Capitals. The Leafs have been dealing with a lot of injuries. It is something that sometimes gets overlooked with Toronto because, oh, look, they're struggling. It's funny, but they've had a lot of injuries. And so if they can get healthy and get themselves really firing on all cylinders going to the playoffs, that'd be great. But we shall see. We're still, of course, a few weeks away from playoff time. For the New York Rangers, it looks like they're getting healthier. Sorry, Rabbit getting into trouble. I had to head that off. Ryan Lindgren and Jacob Trouba are both at morning skate in regular jerseys for the New York Rangers today. So it looks like they're ready to return. That's huge, right? That's 2 top 4 defensemen right there for the Rangers. Oh, right, and the Rangers have been one of, if not the hottest team in the league for the last month and a half, 2 months. So, yeah, the strong just get stronger. The Minnesota Wild, who are sitting pretty far out of a playoff spot, 9 points back currently, not likely to make it. However, Brodin and Eriksson Ek return to their lineup tonight against the San Jose Sharks. So, getting Eriksson Ek back, that's a guy who's, around a 30-goal scorer when healthy. Brodin, one of the better defensive defensemen that doesn't get talked about a lot when we talk about best defensemen in the league. And getting both of them back should make a huge difference for the Minnesota Wild, who, again, their playoff hopes are hanging by a string at this point in time. Aaron Ekblad returns tonight for the Florida Panthers. He's missed the last, I think it said 7 with injury. So him getting back in the lineup could be huge. The Florida Panthers have had their struggles recently. And so, yeah, getting Ekblad back, it could make a huge difference for them. One thing that I've seen a lot online over the last little while, and I get a kick out of it, and I'm just going to say as somebody who watches all the games, there are no easy matchups. And when I see a fan base saying, well, we'd rather face this team than this team, what I'm hearing is, I don't think my team can beat that team, so I'd rather they don't play that one. I want them to play this one instead. And again, if a team's going to win a Stanley Cup, eventually they're going to have to go through pretty good teams. Very often we overreact to who's against who in first rounds, and we'll say, oh, this is great, they got the team they wanted, and then it may end up backfiring. So there are no easy playoff matchups. I know there are people who will argue with me on that. There may very well still be sweeps or 5-game series, but right now everybody's playing pretty darn well who are in a playoff spot, especially in the East. It is hard to find a team in the East that's above the playoff line that you can say, oh, well, they're an easy out. And in the West, as I've said recently, the wild card teams are the defending Stanley Cup champion Vegas Golden Knights and the hottest team in the National Hockey League, the Nashville Predators. So pick your poison and pick wisely, because there are no easy matchups in the National Hockey League anymore. This is a league where only half of the league makes the playoffs, which I think is great. And of course, in the event that there's expansion, it'll be less than half that make the playoffs. And again, I think the harder it is to make the playoffs, the more of an accomplishment it's going to feel like it is. I'm old enough to remember in baseball when you had 4 teams make it to the playoffs, and that was it out of 30. Football, I remember, was a lot more difficult to make the playoffs as well. Playoff expansions taking place in baseball and football. It's taken away some of that specialness you have to making it. It feels like in the National Hockey League we finally have some of that. And so it leads to a situation where, yeah, there's no easy outs. If you decide, oh, well, this is going to be simple, you're probably going to end up being out in that round. So, but let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.